requires mutual understanding with a spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. The enjoyment of the rights and the freedom set forth in the Olympic Charter shall be secured without discrimination of any kind, such as race, color, sex, sexual orientation, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. With such a powerful context and opportunity through sports, there's a huge possibility to promote inclusion in our society at large. Before we begin today's session, we would like to thank our partners for their support. Olympic Studies Center, German Sports University Cologne as our knowledge partner, International Institute of Sports Management as our sports education partner, Geetam, our education partner, and The Bridge, our media partner. Now I would like to introduce moderator for the session, Dilnas, who heads the delivery for the consulting practice for Great Places to Work in India, an organization that is a gold standard in the space of workplace culture assessments. She's a thought leader and client relationship lead for project on workplace culture and employee experience assessment, people practice evaluation, including practices on workplaces, diversity and inclusion. With over 8 years of experience in culture consulting, with diverse areas like organization assessments, change management and cultural transformation, employee value proposition, employee branding and leadership development. Apart from the role which she plays in diversity and inclusion space, she's also an ardent follower of sports in, in India and can be found catching up on live sport in her spare time. So I would now like to invite our moderator for the session, Delnas, and we request her to lead today's session.
Amit, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I think I'd like to begin this session with a quote from the great Nelson Mandela. He once rightly said, and it's perhaps one of his most frequently quoted words, and he spoke about the power of sport. He said, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. Sport can awaken hope where there was previously only despair. Sport in many ways speaks to people in a language that they can understand. And I think for far too long, there have been certain segments of our society globally that have been sidelined, isolated, or marginalized for far too long. Sports in many ways can help us come together to break down some of these barriers and build bridges where there seems to be today a lot of boundaries that have been existing. Sports in many ways can be a tremendous way for us to promote inclusion and be a catalyst, I firmly believe, for introducing systemic change across the world. In order to discuss this a little further, we've got a very interesting session lined up. We're going to begin with our keynote session, and that's going to be followed by a panel discussion with a set of very inspiring set of panelists who've joined us. Our keynote speaker for the day is someone who comes in with tremendous experience and research in the space of physical education and sports, with an emphasis on Olympic studies and education and Olympic values. We have with us Dr. Nelson Todd. Dr. Todd is a professor at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio Grande do Sul. He is also the president of the Pierre de Coubertin Brazilian Committee. He is a research associate in the Olympic Studies Center at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, Spain. Thank you so much, Mr. Todd, for joining us today. We really look forward to a session, and the stage is yours to deliver your keynote session.
Mrs. Renaus, thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be here. good morning in Brazil, good evening in India, and I will share my presentation now to start my introduction. Okay. Hi, everyone. I want to thank Mr. Amit Malik for the invitation from the Abhinav Bindra Foundation to participate in this incredible panel. Sports for Inclusion, Breaking Barriers. It's a great honor, in fact, to be with great panelists like Dr. Lai Wolf and great names in sports like Nicolo and Manzi. I also thank my colleague, Dr. Stefan Vasson, for indication of my name for this meeting. To start this presentation entitled The Social Inclusion by Sports, the Proposal of an Olympic Education, I would like to present two initial quotes. The first, the final chapter of Coubertin's 1930 Olympic memoirs is of extraordinary importance, as it sums up his feelings and thoughts in a kind of intellectual testament. By writing it, he not only addresses the Olympic work of his life, but also the sport for all idea as a heritage of all. This is the reason why Coubertin published, at the end of the test, the Charter for Reform Sporty. The second quote is by International Olympic Committee. Every individual must have the possibility of practicing sport without discrimination of any kind in the Olympic spirit, which requires mutual understanding with a spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. Governments and civil society are seeking strategies aimed at the objectives of inclusion and social development, accentuated in the current circumstances with a historical and global crisis. Thus, this presentation aims to contribute to the discussion about the creation of an Olympic path for social inclusion. The sport can assume a place of prominence within the social programs, governmental or not, addressed to young people in vulnerability. It is well known that the lower classes have always viewed sport as a way of climbing to better position in life, of overcoming barriers of social mobility, and thus potentially to succeed. However, sport encompasses much more than that. In addition to allowing the integration of the individual in the group or the environment, social inclusion through sports programs provides knowledge of their real possibilities and interests. It stimulates creativity, self-knowledge, independence, personal responsibility, living with victories and defeats, makes the individual deal with tensions when faced with unforeseen situations, and promotes experience of ethical and aesthetic values that will serve as learning for life in society. From the perspective of social psychology, sports practice favors the training of self-confidence and, in a certain sense, displays emancipatory effects. However, it's necessary to have a clear idea that sport alone means nothing if it does not link education, teaching, and, without a doubt, the potential learning of sports entertainment with a human development project. These activities include individual, partner, and team sports, contact and non-contact sports, motor-driven or perceptually dominated sports, different emphasis on strategy, chase, and physical skills, and competitive, self-development, and purely recreational activities. Scholars such as Weinberg and Gould believe that sport can have a significant social impact on children, their friends, their family, and the community in general. However, it is not just about playing ball. It is necessary to humanize children by providing meaningful experience that allow people to learn and grow, encouraging creativity, solidarity, and understanding of life as a whole, and looking for a reduction in social exclusion, misunderstanding, and oppression, among other issues. In other words, it is not enough to gather a group of children and youths in a court. This would not be sufficient for a process of personal transformation, much less social process. According to Parlebas, sport has no magic virtue. It is not in itself neither socializing nor anti-socializing. It's what you make of it. Taking into account these assumptions and considering that sport has assumed in several countries a prominent place in the scope of social projects and programs aimed at young people in situations of vulnerability, it is necessary to analyze the knowledge, initiatives, and results generated with respect to development of sports programs for social inclusion based, for example, on Olympism. So I ask the following questions. Why? So that. What to propose? How to do? So let's present some possible answers. For the first question, why? There seems to be a consensus that we are living at this moment in a crisis of values. And a central concern has been to reflect and construct the way in which people begin the task of distinguishing between good and evil, between right and wrong, between proper and improper. Teaching and learning these distinctions are complex and possible controversial subjects. Human values sound strange sometimes, outdated, or without a sense of the utilitarian and pragmatic market inside this universe of understanding and actual competitive behavior. The great dilemma has been to offer opportunities without creating inequalities in society, especially in difficult times, such as what we are experiencing on a global scale today. Now, our second question. So that we are searching a pathway leading to harmonious and authentic human development, thus putting a stop to social exclusion, misunderstanding, oppression, among other things. This route may be education for values, in this case, the Olympic values. In this way, a growing number of social programs and projects appear that consider sport to be an important ally to combat or at least minimize the effects of many evils of the contexts of risk and social vulnerability. Typically, their objectives are strategies to reduce problems such as dropout and school failure, crime in the community, and/or increase the spread of social inclusion and the participants' self-esteem, promoting the sport and setting up values, among others, of course. These kinds of programs, known as social investments, typically aided by the first and second sector, are concerned about the local community. For Fisher, these initiatives gain space in private and non-profit institutions, and their performance is directed to public or collective purposes. Call it the third sector. But in addition to the need to know indicators of results, another weakness is pointed out: the lack of conceptual and programmatic coherence. In dealing with these ideas, the recommended values of Olympism, the Olympic philosophy, may represent an important pedagogical alternative for social inclusion through sport. By associating sport with culture and education, Olympism proposes the creation of an attitude to life based on joy of effort, the educational value of good example, and respect for universal fundamental ethical principles. Pierre de Coubertin considered the Olympism as something beyond simple exercise. McNeely refers to Coubertinian idealism, emphasizing on questions related to the elimination of social injustice. Miller adds, saying that Coubertin had envisioned in the Olympic ideals a dialectical form of education, emphasizing questions related to the elimination of social injustice, especially when he tried to probe issues directed to the process of social relations, recognizing contradictions and inequalities in society. The inclusion of issues related to Olympism, its recognition as an education bias, may result in potential alternatives for the development of learning and development of the human beings. Thereby, many countries have been developing educational programs considering Olympism as a tool, as a way, as a path that combines social and cultural values, beliefs, moral, and virtues. Now that we have listed the possibility of inserting Olympism as a pedagogical element for social programs, let's try to answer the third question: what to propose? In this case, it is necessary to add some other questions. Could the use of Olympic education be a significant pedagogical alternative in social sports programs? What common elements do educational programs in different worldwide contexts have? Do these shared elements generate a social technology which could be applied considering the cultural diversity? Well, I understand social technology as a set of technical, transformative methodologies developed and/or implemented in the interaction with the public. They represent solutions for social inclusion and the improvement of living conditions. Here comes the idea of sports social technology. It is simple, innovative, and low-cost experience developed for educational sports with collective participation, representing effective solutions for social transformation through sports, which can be disseminated and replied in different contexts. This leads us to answer the fourth question: how to do? Well, my proposal is that it be through an Olympic education. And I mentioned before, a sport social technology based on Olympism. To meet the need for these cultural concepts, three crucial strategies, in addition to technical issues and motor skills, the spreads must necessarily, first, encouraging students to use the critical thinking to explore attitudes and values. Second, thinking about emotions and feelings. And third, focusing on relationships to develop caring and compassionate behaviors. The sports programs must go beyond technical issues and motor skills. This practice needs to combine sports with cultural activities, stimulating the imagination, including arts, when it's possible, music, stories, narratives, and creative activities. In this sense, activities should de-emphasize regulations and meaning. Based on Olympism, it can represent a public policy to achieve the goal of a human and social development, more fair, more equal, and fraternal through the sport. Finally, I would like to quote the recently deceased the IOC president, Jack Hogg. He said during the Second International Forum on Sports for Peace and Development that sport cannot solve all of the world's ills. But he was convinced, and I am too, it can contribute to meaningful solutions. There are critics who claim that the Olympics are at heart a sporting event and not a social welfare program. But unlike this assertion, this work gives arguments that go back to the origin of the Olympic movement proposed by Pierre de Coubertin, and showing that the use of Olympic education represents a significant pedagogical alternative in social sports programs. The timing for development of these ideas could not be better. In this delicate moment in which we live, it's possible to align this proposal with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development from United Nations, which provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet. May this be a good time to make ideas like this prosper. Well, thank you so much for listening. Here you have my mail address, social media contact for the Brazilian and the International Pierre de Coubertin committees. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tor. I think this was a very, very insightful session for all of us. I think I took away a lot of key learnings from your note as well. Dr. Tor, we have a couple of questions from some of our panelists and who are largely educators. I think one of them had a question for you, and This is from Ms. Dipanjali, and she really wants to understand, how could educators and teachers, especially those who are in the space of teaching physical education, as coaches, as guides, what could be some of the roles that they could play in also teaching their students about inclusion and larger diversity as they go about their roles. Any thoughts that you have around it?
So thank you so much for this good question, interesting question. I'm from the physical education area, and as I try to show to you, all of you, physical education shouldn't be only play ball. We should use this kind of activity to provoke in children's, youth people, reflections, the critical sense. We could use not only the examples of the professional sportists, but sometimes examples in the Olympians and the professional soccer players, I don't know, can be used just to provoke the children and adolescents to think about some kind of behaviors and compare sometimes with their own behaviors when they are practicing in the classes. On the other hand, it's important to pay attention if this kind of behavior sometimes ideal in the field when they are playing, sometimes is good behavior. It's not good enough if they have this kind of behavior only in the field of play. They must be able to have the same behavior in the home, in the school, in the streets. So if it's possible to have good behavior in the court, in the field play, is possible to do it in other kind of situations. So my desire is to teach the students to think about this kind of possibility, not to say what is right or wrong,
Sure.
but to ask them to think about this, because our values should not change according to the direction of the wind, because sometimes in the sports fields, when some situation is in my favor, it's okay, but when it is against me, it's not okay. Do you remember Maradona player from Argentinian soccer team? Once in the World Cup, he used the hand.
The hand of God.
And hand of God. For who? For the Argentinians, of course. Some years later, Brazil against Argentina in other tournament, a Brazilian player had the same against Argentina. Now, is the hand of God or the evil hands? So my values can't change according to the direction of the wind. And when we are practicing sport, kind of situation came. Naturally, must stop, or in the end of the practice, ask them, what do you think about that?
Sure.
So these kind of situations, teach them.
Absolutely. I
about
think
this.
Dr. Torres, I think it's phenomenal the kind of life lessons that we hear, that we sort of experience and live through as we're on the sporting field. I think it's like no other. Dr. Kaur, we have one
Yeah.
more question, perhaps that we have the time for as a part of this session, and that question really moves from grassroots to more global and international diplomacy. And this is a question from a gentleman, Mr. Lokesh, and his question is about how can we use sports for solutions to our various international problems, including diplomacy conflicts at both grassroots, national, as well as the international level. Any thoughts that you've got on how sports can be a factor to unify the world over and
I would
above?
like to have this answer. I would like to have this answer, and then I should try to work to stop to work just to sell this answer. I would like to have. Anyway, it's a very nice question, and I think sport can't be the responsible to solve this kind of problems. But as I mentioned in the end of this presentation, the sport can help, and we have a lot of examples. In the Olympic Games, we see sometimes the Koreas side by side in the opening ceremony, for example, or some athletes in difficult situation in their countries against in war, for example, and then can live together during the games. The Olympic truce idea is very important in the sense of diplomacy. And it came from the antiquity of in the Greece, the sacred truce. In many events of sports, this kind of diplomacy was offered. Anyway, it's more than just organize a sports event. And the international institutions as well, the International Olympic Committee, United Nations, and other global institutions must be working together. And in this sense, we can see some initiatives from UN and the IOC in this direction. I think it was 2 weeks ago, a lot of countries, they would take part in the next Winter Olympic Games, signed the Olympic Truce Charter. So it solves the problem? I don't think so, but help us. Because other institutions must be involved with this kind of offer. So about grassroots level, national, international, we have a lot of examples in activities grassroots level here in Brazil, but I'm sure that we can find this kind of initiatives in Africa, in all Latin America. I have been heard about that. In this event that I comment to you, Damas and Amit, and some days ago that I was involved, and I invited some friends to talk about practice, not only discourse, because in the discourse is easy, always is easy. Okay, let's do it, something beautiful, sport for development, inclusion, okay. But I would like to know how to do in practice. So I invited some friends from Latin America, Africa, okay, let's see. And it works? Yes. It solves the problem? Of course not, because the problem is it's giant problem. So, but we need to try to help, and the sports can help.
Absolutely. Dr. Todd, I think it just takes me back to something, a sports event I saw last night. It's the Cricket World Cup, and that's a pretty popular sport in this part of the world. And I caught a match which was a relatively low-key game. I think the Afghanistan playing the Scottish team. And I think the Afghans managed to beat the Scots pretty resoundingly. And at the end of it, you should have seen the players in tears. And really talking about what the victory means for their people back home, for a society that's been going through so much and has gone through so much over the last couple of years. And that their captain and their players spoke about the fact that if the victory meant even a glimmer of hope for the people back home, they've sort of managed to do their job, and it sort of resonated with me, some of the things that you mentioned about the power of sport, and really what it can do to a nation. Thank you so much, Dr. Todd, I think, for your lovely views and insights, and really the very, very insightful presentation at the beginning. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure our attendees did too.
Thank you so much. I'm completely honored by this invitation, and I would like to be more involved with this activity, to listen Nicolo, Mansi, and Eli perspectives. Anyway, as you know, unfortunately, my day is terrible today. I have class, and but in fact, I'm here anytime when I can, of course, at disposal of this kind of discussions, and to propose maybe some collaborative initiatives.
Absolutely. We would love to, Dr. Nelson. Thank you so much. I think do stick around for whatever segment of the panel that you can. But thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of the day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. I hope each of you found that discussion just as intriguing as I did. Next, we've got lined up a very, very interesting session with three very inspiring panelists from different parts of the world. Each of you, and each of whom have been driving the case of inclusion in sport in their own independent capacity. I have the honor to introduce all three of them. Our first panelist for this evening is Mr. Eli Wolf. Eli directs the Power of Sports Lab, a platform to fuel and magnify creativity, diversity, connection, and leadership through sport. Eli is also an instructor for the sports management program at the University of Connecticut. He's been a member, of course, of the United States Paralympic soccer team in 1996, as well as the 2004 Paralympic Games. He's been a part of the United States national team and represented them all through 95 to about 2004. A lot of Eli's current work focuses on the intersection of research, policy, and practice to advance sport and human rights, development, and social change. He has coordinated efforts to include sports within the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. He's done a lot of work in the area of social change, including helping establish the SPY Award for the best male and female athlete with disability. In 2009, the Boston Celtics rightly recognized Eli as one of the heroes amongst us. Eli, it's been such an inspiring and interesting journey that you've had, and we look forward to hearing from you through the course of this panel discussion. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Okay,
Our second
everyone.
panelist.
Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. Our next panelist for this evening is Nicolo Campriani. Nicolo, of course, like a lot of you may know, is a three-time Olympic champion. He's competed in 3 Olympic Games, starting with Beijing 2008, right up to Rio 2016, where he retired eventually with a stellar career, and of course, with the gold medal at that Olympics as well. He's been a student athlete for most of his professional sports career, going through first-hand experience of the dual career systems in all 3 countries where he's been in, through Italy, through US, as well as through UK. He strongly believes that the 2 careers, both in sport as well as in academics, have not just been mutually compatible, but very mutually complementary for him. He's currently the Senior Sports Intelligence Manager at the IOC Sports Department. Nicolo also co-founded the Make a Mark initiative, along with fellow Olympic champion Abhinav Bindra. The initiative really aims to enable the next generation of Olympians, to help refugees and forcibly disabled people to compete in sport and embrace the Olympic values. In fact, Nicolo personally helped train 3 of these athletes, Luna, Kaula, and Maudi, each of who represented the refugee contingent at the Tokyo Olympics for 2020. And Nicolo, what a moment it must have been for you to have seen some of these athletes compete at the Olympic Games. Thanks so much for joining us for this panel discussion today. Our third panelist, thank you. Our third panelist for the day is someone who is closer home. She's Mansi Joshi. Mansi is a badminton player, also the current world champion and a change maker. She started her sporting journey professionally in the year 2015. In 2020, she was ranked the #2 player in the world in the women's single category in, of course, her category. Mansi was listed as the next generation leader by the Times Magazine in October 2020. She's appeared on their Asia cover, making her the very first para-athlete in the world, and of course, the first Indian athlete to have featured on the magazine's cover. And this was primarily for all the work that she's done in the space of being an advocate for rights for people with disabilities. On the occasion of the International Day of the Girl Child last year, which falls on the 11th of October, Barbie celebrated Mansi and her achievements by modeling a one-of-a-kind Barbie doll to inspire young girls world over. She's been recognized by the BBC as the 100 most inspirational and powerful women across the world, and was also nominated for the Indian Sportsperson of the Year award last year. Mansi, thank you so much for logging in. I'm sure there's so much that our attendees are going to learn from you as a part of this discussion. Thanks a ton again, all 3 of you, for being a part of this discussion today.
Thank you, Delnas, for introduction, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. Looking forward for a very fruitful conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Eli, I'm perhaps going to begin with you and put you a bit in the spotlight, I think. But Eli, what a career it's been for you. And you know, as we begin this discussion, I'd like to hear a little bit about your personal journey, if you could start off with that. You know, one, what made you choose sports as a career? And all through that, what also sort of kept you motivated to get involved in the wider movement for inclusion? You know, whether it's through some of the biggest forums in the world, through the United Nations, or the forums that you've personally created and invested in when it's come to wider inclusion. Really, talk us a little bit through your journey and what kept you going there.
Sure. No, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here and to be joined by Nicolo and Manasi. I feel like I'm not really sure what I'm doing here with these 2 amazing leaders, and also following the famous Professor Nelson Todd. So it's really an honor. I'm happy just to share for a couple minutes a few pieces of my journey. The most important thing for me was early on, you know, my parents were both Harvard University graduates, and they were both very much emphasized 3 things: education, sport, and service or social justice. And so these initiatives and this focus really inspired me at a young age. And I think as I had my journey as an Olympic experience, as a Paralympian, as an Olympian, you know, I really saw this journey and started to recognize aspects of justice and equality and inclusion and exclusion. And so for me, that really became a driving force for me. And so it was amazing to have the opportunity to be a part of the drafting of the United Nations Convention and to take the lead role for Article 30, which is the right to sport for persons with disabilities. And right at that same time was just as the United Nations Office on Sport for Development and Peace was being organized. And so several of us put the proposal together for the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace, so April 6th, which is now recognized by the UN and the IOC, and to be able to work with the UN and the IOC on that initiative each year is really, amazing. And then most recently, working quite a lot with the Muhammad Ali Center, organizing their sport projects. So yeah, for me, just that inspiration, the journey to be a part of social change and to recognize the important place of disability, that disability is a part of these conversations, that we have to be proud, we have to be vocal, we have to be at the table. It's not something to be shy about. It's really just another part of a human experience. And so that's really important. I think that we're seeing that so much with Manasi and Nicolo and all this panel. This panel is about being really proud about inclusion and about shifting the narrative so that we can make sure disability is people with disabilities are really present in the sport environment. So happy to really be here and looking forward to the conversation with everyone.
Eli, thank you so much. And maybe I'm going to, go to Nicolo with perhaps my next question. Nicolo, you've had a stellar career. I mean, 3 Olympic golds and to sort of bow out of the sport is perhaps in the way you did is perhaps the dream for any athlete. Rio 2016, Nicolo, was also perhaps the first time that we had a refugee contingent at the Olympics. What is it that, and what really triggered that thought process for you in terms of wanting to work with in the space of sports for inclusion? What was really that trigger post, such a phenomenal career that pushed you to give back really to the sport that gave you so much?
Yeah, well, it's a tricky one as there is a bit of a life journey behind the answer, but I'll try to be quick. So I did indeed finish with the Olympic Games in Rio, which was quite an unexpected way for me to finish. I was definitely in a very good shape for London 2012, but I cannot say the same for Rio. And well, it happened. The first gold medal was very much a fight, but the second one really felt a bit like a gift, in a way that I won, but basically leveraging on the mistake of my opponent and so on. So when it comes to just processing what happened, I decided to share some of that luck with UNHCR, with UN Agency for Refugees. So I just made a donation. I used to be a donor, but then basically used some of the prize money of the gold medal for the donation. Then I had the chance then to visit one of the biggest refugee camps in Africa, in Zambia. And that was indeed very, very impactful. And I still remember the words of a girl that we met there and say, don't feel sorry for us, believe in us. And then I knew that there was going to be a refugee team in Tokyo because there was already one in Rio. And so I was thinking how I could leverage on not only my skills as an elite athlete, but also the network that I had at my disposal. So all the sponsors that supported me throughout my career and so on. And basically I decided then to train two initially, then we ended up with three refugees where I live in Switzerland from scratch. They never tried my discipline before. And basically we needed all the sport equipment needed, some cash for the different travels and trips and paying hotel and so on. So it was very much donations from the sponsors and from fellow athletes, as well as crowdfunding. And we started in March 2019. So we had 500 days to go to Tokyo, when Tokyo was supposed to happen in the summer 2020. And it was a bit of a project within a project, because first of all, you need to reach the minimum qualifying score in as an athlete from scratch. So that was challenge number one. And then, of course, there was a very new experience for them. And just traveling the world, a lot of the experience that we did with them, it was always the first time of something, first flight in their life, first time in an hotel, first time in. So I had also the lack of going through this experience through their eyes, as well as in the end the Olympic Games in Tokyo, where Luna competed as part of the Olympic refugee team, one of the 29 athletes, and Madi competed as representative of Afghanistan. So that was, quite a unique journey.
Yeah, I'm sure. And Nicolo, what a proud moment it must have been for you to see them walk through and compete with the very best in the world. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it as we go along in this discussion, but I want to go to Mansi. Mansi first. Mansi, yours has been, just as, intriguing a journey of sorts. You went through a very, very unfortunate accident that sort of forced you to relook at life at large, for you. Perhaps talk a little bit, and if you could maybe give us an insight into that journey of moving to picking up sports as a profession after having undergone such a major life experience that would have perhaps changed or transformed anybody. And what do you think has been the role that sports played in sort of keeping you going through such a unfortunate incident in life? If you could maybe give us a little bit of insight into that.
Thank you, Delnas, for the question. I met with an accident almost 10 years back. So this 3rd December in 2021, it will be like a 10-year amputation anniversary for me. And I still feel like, it's yesterday. And I recently realized it's going to be 10 years. And I thought, how has those 10 years passed? It still feels like yesterday. So actually, since my childhood, I've been very active in the field of sports, and not only sports, but also in music, culture, like cultural activities, or anything which an outgoing child is really interested in at early part of their childhood. So I used to go for football as well as badminton coaching, and then later I picked up badminton as a sport, and I got selected for badminton coaching and started playing for my school, college, and continued in my engineering as well as corporate life. Sport was a way of life. Since my childhood, I've been actively participating in drama, in I'll say all curricular activities. If there is a group song, singing competition, I'm there. If there is a dance competition, I'm there. I graduated in 2010, and I started working with a French MNC as a software developer. And in that company, I have felt so many great place to work forms also. So yeah, I was very fresh out of college, and as a very young graduate, you have a life full of dreams and aspirations, and you want world for yourself. You want to achieve it all, and you know that you are there to do that kind of a hard work to be there in the corporate world. But within 1 year of working, I met with an accident, and my life came to a standstill. At least at that time. For me, acquiring disability took my life back 5 to 6 years. And in those, I had to relearn everything. I had to relearn how to walk, balance, etc., etc. And sport was a part of my life. So I used sports for my rehab purpose and started playing badminton again. I actually used that sport in my rehab, which quickened my rehabilitation process. I took up yoga and meditation, and because my life was a desk job at that time, I wanted to be really active. So every time I come home from work, I'm doing my fitness and workout. And again, when I had corporate tournaments in my office, And I would love to participate there. And in one of the corporate tournament before accident, I had won a gold medal in badminton, which was like, okay, I was playing the sport. But again, after acquiring disability, I again played that tournament with able-bodied people and again won a gold. And that was like a life-changing moment for me. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I have reached, here, and sports is not only about having the best of physical movement and all, it's all about going out there in the field and trying it out. And since then, I've been trying out sports. I started playing sports professionally. I won't say professionally, but I started playing at international level in 2015, where one of my amputee friends suggested to try badminton for people with disabilities. Before that, I had not heard about that sport. Where people with disabilities play the sport. It was not even part of Paralympic Games. This 2020, it made its debut. And I, of course, couldn't be the part of team this Paralympic Games. I'm hoping I qualify for next games. But yeah, I think sports has given me an ability to, amplify my voice. In 2019, I became a world champion. I forgot to add that part. But yeah, sports, with hard work, with dedication and persistence of making sure you are out there on the court. It has helped me to reach this level. I think currently sport is providing me, like it is giving me an ability to be more outspoken, meet new people, understand the whole small nuances of humanity through a very different perspectives. And it is providing me a vehicle which can take my thoughts and vision to people around India and world.
Thanks, Mansi, for sharing. Really, I think this journey must have been really personal to you, and thank you for putting it out there for all of us to get a bit of insight into that as well. Ila, I'm going to maybe come back to you and with a question. I happened to see one of your TED Talks where you speak about, a model of saying, how do you move from invisibility to visibility to invisibility back again? And I'm sure, you're going to be able to perhaps elaborate it and talk about it a lot better than I can. But, I was I particularly loved the way you put it there during that, and I'd love for some of our attendees to hear about it from you as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about kind of how do we create kind of seamless inclusion and how do we really ensure that inclusivity is really a part of the fabric of our society. And I think it's really about how do we normalize, how do we create relationships? How do we create visibility? How do we create engagement so that people of difference or people that may appear different or maybe the relationships aren't there, like how do we begin to get people more connected and more engaged so that, these can be friendships, these can be relationships. And so instead of it being, something that seems so, out of the blue or something where there's a lot of stigma or fear, that instead we begin to think about how do we, these relationships become so important to then become part of the fabric of our society. And so I think that's not only this relationship building is important for disability, but it's, across the board. And I guess that's, one thing I was wanting to share about is just the whole power and responsibility of sport. To me, I think that sport really does have this platform and ability to really have a way to make a huge difference. And so that's why, in working with governments and working across NGOs and all sorts of Olympic committees and so forth, is I'm really about how important sport is. Because if we, trivialize it or only make sport about entertainment, then we aren't really prioritizing it and making it really essential. And so I think, to kind of go back a little bit to the question to Nelson about, can sport and does sport have a responsibility and so forth. And I would actually argue that we need to make sure sport is at the table, is in the policy rooms, is a part of national agendas. And instead of sport being only about entertainment, how do we make sure that sport is really, and not, when I say sport, I'm not only talking about elite and entertainment sport, I'm talking about sport for development, sport for change, that these notions need to really be, for example, right now, many countries don't have sport for development in their national agendas, and how do we make sure that that really is there? Because it really is important, because it does make that difference, and it does break down these relationships. So, I'm going to put a call to action that we do put sport on the table.
Ilan, I think you rightly mentioned, that there are a number of countries world over that haven't been as privileged to have, sports for development, sports for change as a part of the national rhetoric there. And hence, one question to you is, what's the kind of on-ground impact, the kind of social change that you've been able to see personally as an outcome of some of these initiatives for inclusion? Would love to hear any, even anecdotes or stories from you about the actual presence that you've seen or the change that you've seen on ground. And at the same time, if you've got any learnings for a country like ours at the moment, we're obviously slightly more in a more developing phase, but you've got any thoughts or any ideas on how we could, in our capacity, also look to implement some of these? Would love to hear that from you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sport is basically, it's about the intentionality. It's about how we're utilizing sport and really, putting the right emphasis there. And so one of the most amazing, days of the year for me is this April 6th day, which is the International Day of Sport for Development and the power of sport. And it's really amazing to see, be a part of this team of people that are part of the global network organizing. And what we do is we're able to see kind of all of the projects and all of the initiatives around the world. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of them that are utilizing the power of sport and sport for inclusion and change. And so to see that these initiatives and how they're really changing lives and how they're really having direct impact and making sure that sport is inclusive and really making a difference, it just makes me realize that if this Sport for Change Day was every day of the year, which it is, I mean, ultimately this is every day of the year that sport is happening in our communities every day of the year. But it's really about the intentionality of how we're really making sure that we're constructing sport. So it's not just about entertainment. It's not just about escaping reality, but sport is reality. And so how do we make sure that these realities of people and the human lives that are being impacted by sport? And so that's what we're seeing. And so the more and more countries can really engage in this and leverage the leaders. So part of it is the human capacity, like there's, people are the ones that make these changes. So the more that we have leaders and media campaigns, and more that we have policies, and the more that we invest in structures and so forth, that really prioritize the power of sport, and really leverage all of these great grassroots programs and so forth as best practice, that's really what makes the difference. So, I think that the more and more we really value and prioritize sport for inclusion, then it really helps make a huge difference in our national landscapes and our international landscape. So
Sure,
I'll probably stop there. Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Eli. I think for us personally, it was a proud moment when we sent in perhaps one of our largest contingents this year at the Olympics as well as at the Paralympics, and perhaps one of our most gender balanced contingents that went out this year. I think that's particularly something that was heartwarming personally for me, and I hope that Paris 24 is going to be even better for us. Nico, I'm going to maybe come to you to also understand, you've personally seen some of these athletes that you worked with at close quarters. What do you think was the wider sort of social impact of the initiative that you ran for some of these athletes back home? At the same time, maybe if you could give us a little bit of insight into what's going to look like the future roadmap for the Make a Mark initiative as well. We'd love to hear a little more about it.
Yeah, and the two questions are very much connected. There are basically two dimensions, I would say. One is the impact that the project had on these guys and everybody involved, to be honest, because also the entourage, myself, has been deeply impacted by the project. And also the legacy that we wanted to leave with this project, and also potentially inspire other athletes to do a similar thing with their respective communities of refugees and asylum seeker. So in terms of the impact on Madi, Luna, and Kaula, well, it changed their life, and they are pretty amazing at reminding us this almost weekly, how much their life has changed thanks to the project. And it's it's something that you can see through their eyes, but it's something that they like to express. And every time when they look back at the last 2 years, they've been traveling around the world, not as much as we wanted to because of the COVID restrictions, but they've been traveling quite a bit. They met athletes from all over the world. And most important, there is this concept of identity. I think for them, Madi, I think, is a good example. It's the whole refugee definition is basically this sort of label that you attach to a person, but basically you're saying that it doesn't belong to a specific country, and it's a bit of a citizen of the world, which is a good concept, but I can see how from an athlete point of view, it's a little bit too vague in the end. And for him to be able to call himself an athlete and to be able to say, I belong to this community and that's who I am, and that's what I do, and that's what's next, I think it was very important. I think, when I started to present him to my friend that this is an athlete that I'm training, you could see that he was happy, not because of just, the Olympic preparation. It was very much linked to this idea of now belonging to a community, belonging to a family. So that's one. In terms of what we wanted to do, well, the project was very much based on donations. At the same time, I really wanted to enable all of them to continue to train and potentially prepare for Paris if they wanted to, without being dependent on me. They all are, to be honest, because now they have their own sport equipment. They register to a sport club in Switzerland, and they're pretty much independent. And I check on them regularly, but not as often as I used to. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that in order to maximize the impact, others would have picked the button and tried a similar project. And so far, we had an Olympic champion in archery from Spain that decided to do this project with his international federation, World Archery. So they are now in the recruiting phase of refugees, because at the moment there are no refugee athletes, right? And then we'll see if they will manage to reach the minimum qualifying score. Again, for me, it was such a rewarding experience that I strongly recommend to any elite athlete that retire from sport. For me, it was a very powerful way to give meaning to 16 years, so lots of time spent in a shooting race, thousands and thousands of hours staring at a piece of paper. Now, I don't want to oversimplify it, but that's basically what it is. And I guess at the end of your career, you try to find meaning, and maybe this is a personal opinion, but the medals didn't work for me in terms of really justifying and say, it's worth it. Even 3 Olympic gold medals, it just wasn't enough. So I had to look back, and thanks to my sport, I had a chance to spend more weekends with my dad, and this is time that I would not have had otherwise. I met incredible mentors in my life, people that are still very much important for me in my second life, and I had the chance to change the life of Madi, Kaul, and Luna. So I think these are the things that give meaning to a career, but more important, give meaning to a life. So I see this as very much a win-win type of situation where, yes, you're helping refugees to better integrate the respective societies and so on. But really, it's something that I strongly recommend and suggest to other athletes, and we are going to support and empower any other athletes that wants to do the same with full transfer on knowledge, what we learn, and so on.
Sure, Nico, thanks. I think for sharing this. It's just so fulfilling, for us to hear about this, and we've got a lot of young minds who are attending this webinar, and I'm sure the kind of impact that your story and your ability to really give back is making such an impression on some of these young minds. Thank you for sharing that. Mansi, as I come to you, perhaps, with one of our final questions for our panel before we take the questions that we have from our attendees today. Mansi, you've seen the sport a lot closely, back here at home, and it looks like we've made tremendous progress. I mean, our overall representation at the Paralympics this year, the count of medals is quite the progress from what it's been over the last few years. So two things. One, perhaps maybe from your point of view, would love to understand, what do you think made the change happen? And what's the kind of impact that we're now therefore seeing in terms of future representation for India at the Olympics, and of course some of the larger global events? Would love to hear a little bit from you, because you've seen this at close quarters at home here.
Thank you, Delnas, for this question. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be listening to both Nicolo and Eli of their experiences and share how important it is, how sports is important for inclusion. I myself have experienced life and formative years as a non-disabled person, and currently as a disabled person since 2011. And I have seen a huge disparity in quality of life and mindset of people here. When we say that this year we sent one of the largest contingent at Paralympic Games, we sent 54 athletes, which is huge. And we came back with huge number of medals this year. But then at Paralympic Games, we have around 500 plus events. And I wish to see more and more participants, at least one per event, and maybe more number of participants from the country, because our population is currently, we say we are 2.7% of population which is disabled. But this is census 2011. In 2016, RPWD 2016, like Rights for People with Disability 2016 Act was passed. And after that, number of disabilities have increased from 7 to 21, I think. And when we see, 21 is a huge number. And we are now having thalassemia, sickle cell disease, and acid attack survivors as people with disabilities. I think the number of population that is going to go high in the next census, which was supposed to happen in 2021, I'm sure it's going to happen in the next few months, we'll see a huge number of population as disabled. The number is going to change. Currently, the global average, it says, is 15% of population. With the We the 15 new movement has started, We the 15, which says 15% of world's population is disabled. Now, let us not say, ke, chalo, 15%. Let us say our country, because we are 2.7%, let's say 10% of population is disabled. With 1.4 billion people, I think it's 130 million people who are disabled right now, which is one of the biggest minority in the country. I feel that we need to go way much stricter, higher, and I to make sure that people with disabilities are in the mainstream. It is so, I mean, I have seen as a person with disability that I have to prove myself every time, wherever, if I need to have a new project in my organization, if I want to try out sports at international events, if I want to continue playing sports as a woman with disability, every minute I need to prove myself. And I think it is not, all these things should not fall on me. I think I need to have a system in place which allows me to go out there and try whatever opportunity I need to try or I want to try. And I think because I'm not defined. I mean, I can say I'm definitely defined by my disability, but I have more definitions to myself, say my goals, my purposes, my dreams, my directions, and my education. There are so many other things which defines me, and to be just defined by my disability is one thing which I don't want to, be known as. But then that is what it is at the end of the day. Mansi Joshi, a disabled athlete, and I wish people to know more and more sides of people with disabilities. Right now, we are seeing that our country is going little closer to the accessibility stage, where our organizations like we have 3% of reservations in our corporates and government sector, which makes sure that seats or there are jobs available. Like the 3% of population get jobs through reservations, and if we can say we are 10% of population, which I'm just assuming 10, I'm saying it's more than 15% in India. And how many corporates or institutes hire people with disability or have their 10% of population as disabled? I think close to none, I think. And this is where we need to bridge the gap. When sports gives you this ability to be, speak up, I do not want sports to just be a thing of sports, because para sports right now, as Eli also said, from invisibility to visibility to invisibility. So right now it's time for, I don't know how I have not heard his TED talk, and I am going to right now go and listen to it. But right now we are from invisibility to visibility. We have to speak up. Right now, if we don't speak up, I do not think who else is going to do. And I think sports is giving that medium. I really want more and more people to be advocate for people with disabilities. And that's why whoever comes to me or messages me, or there is any communication where people feel that I feel left out, I say, go read RPWD 2016 and get empowered. You will come to know what are your rights and responsibilities and how you should be treated. And whoever is not treating you the right way, go write an email to them and tell them that this is what you need to do. Well, this is like too much of activism that I'm saying through. But then, yeah, that you get this voice, right? I'm sitting here in an inclusion summit, I can say, and speak about it. It's only because I have got this voice through sports. And I have learned that, the countries that are most powerful or most developed are the ones who invest maximum, not only on their infrastructure or road or space or anything else. The most powerful of the countries are the ones who invest maximum on culture, preservation of arts, and sports. And by sports, I mean sports which is inclusive for everyone, not only for people with disability. Right now, I'm saying inclusive for people of all age groups, all sexuality, and everyone. And then, if my country, I'm seeing a huge change. My roads, my metros, my latest monorails, everything are disabled friendly, and we are making sure people are shouting that yes, we need disabled friendly spaces, we need accessible spaces, we need sports facilities which are accessible. We are shouting, and I am just right now shouting, but there are people way before me who have said this, and because of them, we're able to see the sea of change here. And I wish to see the sea of change again in future. And I think sports gives you that medium. I think people, if you ask me what should we be doing as countrymen, then I think we should be taught inclusivity sensitivity right through our curriculum, and that's what Professor Todd said in his session a few minutes back, where he said that sports is about starting sensitivity of people. And if we include this right for our curriculum, I do not want special schools for people with disabilities. Education is integrated. We have this new education policy, which was drafted in 2020, which says education is for all. But I also see that, the sensitivity it takes time. Right now, a few days back, Sudha Chandran made an Instagram video where she said that she faced so much of insensitivity at the airport, and she had to go through some traumatic experience. I think nobody should go through that. I remember when, as a new amputee, like my parents, like my mother is truly so much into, I can say, religion. And she wanted me to visit temple after my accident, and she wanted me to be, taking blessings from God. And, so as you know, we have to remove our chappals to get into a temple. For me, I had just learned how to stand on a prosthetic leg, and walking was a big issue at that time for me. I was, of course, able to walk, but I could not walk without shoes. So there are this heel height that we have, and I cannot walk without shoes. My prosthetic heel height needs to be maintained. And my mother was very adamant that no, we have to go to temple and I'll arrange things. So we went to the temple. We told the pujari and the temple authorities that, I have come for the first time to visit temple, and that I'm not wearing any leather or anything. Can she enter temple with shoes? And the pujaris and the temple authorities were so sensitive. I don't know how. I mean, they were so kind. They said, yeah, of course, our Sri Ram wears padukas and enters into temples. So you do not need to remove chappals to go into temples. It's just like currently the whole purpose of religion has changed. But we were like, this was inclusion. I saw inclusion first day when I went out. And then right now, it's not there outside. I mean, when I go to biggest of temples in the country, I do have to remove my chappals. Of course, I've learned how to walk without shoes, but then I saw inclusion, and then again, we have come a little backwards, and then again, we have to go there. So I think I want to reach out to more and more people saying that, yes, I went into a temple with my shoes on without any discussions, and whoever was giving me like a weird eyes, a very weird look, they were like, I was like, I don't care. This is where I need to be right now. So yeah, I mean, it changes, the mindset is important. And the way we speak about it, the way we speak more about it, I think change is going to happen. And I see that change. So yeah.
And Mansi, thank you for being that voice of reason in a country that can, sometimes overlook some of these sensitive things. I know we've got a long way to go, but I hope we can make a start somewhere. I think we've got about 5 minutes to go, and I'd love to maybe hear, some parting thoughts from each of you. Any message that you would like to leave our attendees and our audience with? Maybe Eli, we'll begin with you, and then go to the other two panelists.
Yeah, no, I can be really quick, and I'll just thank you again so much for the honor and opportunity to be here, and really, really awesome to be with Manasi and Nicolo with great comments and experiences, and feel like our team effort here has been really excellent. Just briefly, 2 comments. One is just about the whole idea of experiencing exclusion oftentimes inspires an understanding about inclusion, because that lived experience, the ability to actually understand or seeing experiences of exclusion oftentimes will inspire an understanding for inclusion. And so I think that's part of our lived experience, and part of the way we have these aha moments is we actually experience injustice. And so the second thing I wanted to say and share is this whole mantra of nothing about us without us. And that has really been the call to action for a lot of inclusive movements. And I particularly there's been a movement over the last couple years particularly around the Olympic movement in a broad sweeping sense. And I know the Olympic movement is working on their human rights strategy and so forth, but to ensure that disability is included, because right now disability is not included in the Olympic Charter, it's not included in the Olympic movement. And so I think we're going to see that over the next couple of years. We're going to see with the new rollout of the human rights inclusion strategy that disability will be included. But I think that is always important, that whole notion of nothing about us without us. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Eli. Nico, over to you.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a situation with a fire alarm in the hotel, but yes, but so I have a little bit of a background noise. I just want to thank you all again. Maybe stop now. Okay, it wasn't serious. But look, thank you all for the invite, and do not underestimate the power of hope. I think that you know what the difference that one person and one project can make, and the impact that can have on others. I think that's that would be my takeaway message. You know, I got inspired throughout my life by amazing people, and it was, you know, sometimes even one sentence, and it made an impact on my life, and a lot of things that I did after that are a bit of a result of all these things. So it's one drop. I wanted to change the world. I still want to change the world, but sometimes I had to struggle with this feeling of, you know, feeling powerless and that the system is too big, and where do I start? Do not underestimate the power of one person and one project. I think that would be my my message for you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely, Nico. Thanks. That's such an inspiring message to leave everyone with. Mansi, any parting thoughts from you?
I think I've learned so much by listening to Eli and Nicolo. And as today Eli said, that nothing about us without us. Yes, that's a great message. I mean, this is what is inclusion. And we have to follow this in our country and make sure that, yes, nothing about us without us.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Mansi. I think in conclusion, I just want to say that we've got a lot of young minds on this call, and at the end of the day, it's going to take each and every one of us to come together to build a truly inclusive world where nobody feels left behind, not at least because of either their disability or an ethnicity or religious or gender identity that they come from. We hope that this webinar was useful to each of you. I hope each of you took away something in terms of learning from each of our three panelists. And I hope that we can someday come together to celebrate really each of our differences, what makes us unique, but at the same time, really also recognizing us as a shared humanity. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having the three of you on this conversation. Personally, very, very fulfilling for me. Thanks a lot. And thank you to all of our attendees for staying with us through the last 90 minutes. Thanks, everyone, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for having me, and I'll connect.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I look forward to being in touch with everyone. Yeah. Manasi, I'll follow up for sure.
I followed you on Twitter, so